Hi everybody, I'm Dana Shoaf, editor of Civil War Times Magazine, and I'm here with Melissa Wynn, director of photography for the magazine, and welcome to our April First Monday's broadcast. Now, it is a gorgeous spring day, and you might be able to see around me, the flowers are in bloom, the sky is blue, and we are in our nation's capital as this heavy helicopter traffic that we have no control over, of course, might tip you off. We are in the capital's other famous cemetery. So let's let this big chopper get over us here. We are in Southeast DC, in our nation's capital, and we are in Congressional Cemetery. Now probably most of you have been to Arlington National Cemetery at some time in your life, which is on the west side. But Congressional Cemetery here in Southeast DC along the Anacostia River is a fantastic place with a lot of historical graves and personalities buried here. And this unusual shape next to me is called a cenotaph. This was designed by Benjamin Latrobe, an early American architect, and it's one of the really unique features of Congressional Cemetery. The cemetery was founded in 1807, and what's interesting is our national cemetery system is a post-Civil War construct because there were so many war dead that had to be dealt with. Congressional Cemetery is the only sort of nationally funded cemetery that existed before the Civil War. It was originally formed to bury members of Congress that passed away when they were here serving in DC. To help take us around this beautiful cemetery and tell us some of its history, we have a very well-versed guide with us, Steve Hammond. He's the Civil War guide here at Congressional Cemetery. Steve, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And as Steve told me before we got on, he was on many Ed Barst tours. He knew Ed Barst really well. He's passionate about the Civil War. And tell us about your ancestor, who was the founder of the 27th Pennsylvania.
Yes, my great-great-grandfather, Max Einstein, founded the 27th Pennsylvania, and in fact, he actually visited Lincoln for Lincoln to have him come in, and he was basically, they're going to become a cavalry unit, but Lincoln told Max, no, we need infantry.
Need infantry, yeah.
So they became an infantry unit, and they then appeared in multiple battles, including the Battle of Gettysburg, and his unit was did fairly well.
So you said at Gettysburg, their monument is located where the Brickyard fight took place.
That's right. That's one of their monuments.
One of their monuments.
They have a second monument over on East Cemetery Hill.
Okay. So they were part of the brigade where the famous Amos Humiston, whose children became a symbol of the cost of war. He was found clutching that famous CDV of his 3 kids. His regiment, the 154th New York, was in the same brigade as the 27th, and
yes.
They fought in that. If you've ever been to the Brickyard site, it's this little strip in town, and one of their monuments is there.
I literally used to play football on that strip.
Wow!
Because that is my hometown.
Wow, that's fantastic.
But yeah, it's interesting, but.
Well, tell us a little bit about Congressional Cemetery.
Well,
it was formed in 1807, right?
That's right, and in fact, it started out fairly small and has expanded since then, and there are multiple Civil War burials here, but there are also multiple burials of people from, it's like, I believe it's 60,000 bodies are in the ground here, and probably 13,000, 14,000 actual markers.
Okay. How many Civil War first personalities are here? Do you happen to know?
Not offhand.
Okay.
There's
a lot.
Yeah. There are multiple. There's a fella here who then, Meade has 2 sisters who are buried here.
Okay.
And there's one of Meade's adjutants.
George Gordon Meade, commander of the Army of the Potomac, of course. Yeah.
Well, and but his adjutant is he then went on to run a regiment for him he was active after the Civil War.
Okay.
And he, in fact, he's a Navy personnel because his father then helped design ships for
Is this Humphreys you're talking about?
Humphreys.
Andrew
right.
Atkinson Humphreys, who was a chief of staff of the Army of the Potomac. Yeah. So he's buried here. You know, and Humphreys had a Confederate brother.
Right.
Joshua, correct? Joshua?
Yes.
Who was in the Navy, Confederate Navy.
Right.
And he's buried here, right?
Yes, he's buried here. And in fact, Humphrey's father and uncle are buried here also.
Really great lineage, military lineage. So, it's founded in 1807, and tell us about these cenotaphs, which are not necessarily Civil War, but they're certainly unique to this.
Yeah, well,
this
the
cemetery.
cenotaphs, in fact, there's even one in Arlington. I saw it at one point, and I said they stole it from here. But these are commemorate. Generally, if you were in Congress and you died while in service, you could get a cenotaph here. Most of them do not have burials here, but it's not unusual for them to be part of it.
And there's some folks are buried here.
Yes.
But most of them are not. It's like a monument to their service almost.
Yes.
And I did read that really the burials here pretty much stopped in 1876 under the cenotaphs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there was a thing that said that was a far worse pain.
Yeah. So I'll read the quote here. So this is an unusual design, obviously, very unique. And in 1876, Massachusetts Senator George Hoar was quoted as saying, "The thought of being buried beneath one of those atrocities brings a new terror to death." So they had kind of gone out of fashion at that point. But if you walk down these the rows here, you'll see some very significant names. Like, for example, this is John Quincy Adams, the son of the president, I believe you said. And there's notable people that the cenotaphs. I think there's 30-some people actually buried under them.
Yeah, that's about right.
And then the rest of them are just sort of markers.
Yeah.
And they still use them, right?
Well,
occasionally.
Well, in fact, Tip O'Neill. Is right up here, as is Cokie Roberts' father.
Cokie Roberts, yes. And Cokie Roberts is buried here, too.
Yes.
The commentator who recently passed away. Now, before we leave this area, again, this is not necessarily Civil War, but it gives you a flavor for this very unique place. Oh, before we move on, very recently, this was not in good repair. Congressional Cemetery, it had kind of been neglected. Tell us the unique story of how it's been brought up, and it's gorgeous looking now.
Ed Bars will tell you he used to come here for tours and couldn't get people in the door.
Yeah,
it was that bad.
The neighborhood was bad, and you're right.
But the locals, because they were the dog walkers, started to come here and create their own space, and they came in and started to do this. And basically, they have now a Friends of Congressional Cemetery group that will sit and support it, and so that's how it all got done. Probably about 15 years ago.
It hasn't been that long. You know, I was here for the first time maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's nicer than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh yeah, well, you know, we now at least have mowing done.
Yeah,
which wasn't done for the longest time.
So who administers this now? Is it?
It's the people at. There is a director of the cemetery here.
So it doesn't have any congressional funding or anything. No. Okay. Just so people are aware, it's not the government that's neglecting it. It's on its own now. But yeah, the local dog walkers formed a friends group and have brought attention to this. So I love dogs. I have 2 of them. So if you come here, you're also going to see a lot of dogs, which I think is great. And because people from the neighborhood walk through here, but they raise funds to help the cemetery.
And I got bitten by a dog.
Oh, well, yeah. That happens a lot, right? Sometimes. So before we move on, Melissa, if you want to walk and you just kind of see the top of called the Public Vault, which is right around the corner here. And that was a temporary internment place for a lot of notable people.
Well, and at the time, you could not drop a spade into the earth without running into the frozen ground. So they could put a person in there and leave him. And in fact, oddly enough, William Henry Harrison only spent 30 days in the White House. He spent 90 days in the public vault.
So President Harrison dies, and he's placed in the public vault because it was too cold to dig a grave. The ground was frozen. And I think Dolly Madison was in the public vault for a while.
Right.
Yeah, so really notable people were temporarily interred here because the ground was too frozen or for various reasons until they found their final resting place. Well, I think we're going to move on, but is there anyone that wants to say hello?
Oh yeah, we've got lots of people on. Richard Holloway is on.
Hey, Richard.
Ryan Kaiser.
Ryan.
Mark Fleetwood.
Hey, Mark from Colorado, my old friend.
Luis Acevedo.
Hey,
Hi,
Luis.
Luis. Jeremy Brenneman.
Jeremy, how are you?
Michael Chansey from West Virginia.
Hey, Mike.
Mark Grimm is touting Pennsylvanians.
Mark Grimm.
Mike Wolfel.
Nice.
John Verrill. Hi, John.
Hey, John, how are you?
Harry Smeltzer. Hi, Harry.
Hi, Harry.
A few other people too. We've got a great showing so far.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for tuning in. And we're going to leave here. I wanted you to kind of get introduced to the cemetery and where we are. And we're going to our next two stops, we're going to stop at a person very significant to the Civil War, and then our third stop is going to be a really poignant memorial. So give us about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so to get to the next stop, and we'll be back with you, okay? So until then, this is Dana Shoaf, Steve Hammond, and Melissa Wynn signing off from Congressional Cemetery in Southeast, D.C.